Today we're going to finally talk about what y'all probably thought we were going to talk about the whole time: psychological disorders. Okay, we'll talk about that. Look at that. Psychological disorders. See, obviously, as I said, industrial, organizational, psych, and stress and health. They're good topics, but they're not. But look, psychological disorders, 2.5 class periods. All right, so clearly we're going to spend some time on it. And then we'll finish it up with a little bit of therapy and treatment, all right? We'll get some treatment or something, okay? Kind of assume what this means is that there will be a lot more questions on the exam on 15 and 16 than there will be on, right? Because, I mean, spent more time on it, it's going to be heavier on the exam. So, here it is, psychological disorders. In a lot of ways, this is outside of my area of expertise. All right, I'm an experimental psychologist, and my job is to basically understand how normal human behavior works, right? To quantify normal human behavior. And here we're going to be talking about abnormal behavior. So before we get into it, okay, we're going to talk about some specific types of disorders when we get, further along. But first, we need to talk about, what is a psychological disorder? Because this is crazy. There was a time, I don't know, 1972 or 73. All of a sudden, it was like December 31st, homosexuality was a mental disorder. January 1st, homosexuality was not a mental disorder. It was just, it literally, overnight, it switched from, all right? And it was really odd to, really? Homosexuality was considered to be a mental disorder? And I actually heard an interview one time with a psychiatrist who was homosexual, and he says, at that point in history, it qualified for a mental disorder because being homosexual greatly interfered with my ability to navigate and function in society. And to the degree that we're going to talk about mental disorders are really, we're going to talk about defining them and everything, but it's like, if you have something going on and it interferes with your ability to function as a normal human being, then that is a disorder. And the idea was, at that point in history, you could not function and do the normal things that a person has to do with that situation. So it's like, okay, it's an odd way to think about it, but I can understand. Oh my God. Oh, no TV and no beer make Homer go crazy. Anybody see that one? That was a good one from The Shining. Y'all remember The Shining? Anyway. I'm writing a book, Marge. It's going to be called No TV and No Beer, something, something. That was a good episode. All right. So, here's the thing. Now, I guess we'll look at it. A breakdown of mental disorders. This is 2007. And we see here that the most commonly, this is males, females separately, and then total is in blue. So we can see here that, number one, that there are clear gender differences in a lot of these mental disorders. Okay? You can see, for example, women are much more likely to exhibit depression. Men are much more likely to exhibit alcohol abuse. Women are more likely to be phobic and socially anxiety. Men are more likely to be drug abusing. Women are more likely to be in PTSD and generalized anxiety and panic. So you can see that there are definitely some distinctions in genders between how mental disorders manifest. Okay? Here's always a big warning. When we talk about some of these mental disorders, we're going to talk about some of these mental disorders, so we're going to be talking about symptomology, for example. All right? And we're like, these symptoms, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, that's me. I have those symptoms. Yes, you do. I guarantee you, every symptom of every mental disorder you have, okay? But there's degrees of symptomology. Of course you feel depressed sometimes. Of course you feel anxiety. I mean, duh, you would wouldn't be human if you didn't feel these things, okay? The question is, have these symptoms manifested themselves so much that they have interfered with your ability to function and perform the roles that you need to do, okay? So it's going to be this idea. So when we look at these symptoms, it's not like unique, like, oh, you have them and you're crazy and you have them and you don't. Or, it's just, no, I mean, it's this kind of idea. So be careful that you don't start to self-diagnose yourself, right? Don't be all, because every single one of them, you got them all, okay? You must be a bugger load of crazy, dude, all right? So different ways that we might define mental disorders. Personally, I'm gonna gravitate to the bottom, right? That's where I'm gonna go. But I'll start with discomfort and deviance, just for, if a behavior causes an actor pain, then that behavior is somehow abnormal. Okay, maybe, I guess. But say, for example, autism. A person with autism, they don't know that they have autism, and even if they did, they wouldn't give a shit. It does not cause them pain in any way, shape, or form, because they don't even know it's happening, okay? They don't know any difference. So maybe, how about deviance, okay? That is like, if it's somebody is really weird. Well, look at these dudes. These dudes are freaking weird, okay? Yet, you know what? They probably are normal members of the community and they work at the bank, and they just cover up for their normal job. And so having tattoos all over their entire body, though incredibly bizarre in my opinion and deviant, doesn't interfere with their ability to function. Gotcha? And so to me, and I hope you realize I really have an affinity for evolution, right? All about adaptation. And so if you have an ability, if you have a situation that is interfering with your ability to adapt, right, then that is a disorder. That is really what it is. It's about adaptation. Can you perform the requirements for your role? Okay. The American Psychological Association attempts to put a definition on it. Significant disturbances in thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Okay. The disturbances reflect some kind of a biological, psychological, or developmental dysfunction. All right, this one I'm going to latch on. The disturbances lead to significant distress or disability. And then the disturbances do not reflect expected or culturally approved responses. And so we're going to have to talk about the cultural definitions of what a mental disorder is. Because different cultures have different explanations. In some cultures, what we might say is a mental disorder, somebody else might say that is evidence that God has manifested themselves in you. All right? So it's like, it depends on how one culture might accept it. Okay? So yeah, culture-bound syndromes. That is, disorders which seem to exist in only one culture, or they're really, it's defined the way some culture might, depression and schizophrenia are everywhere. Bulimia, for example, is pretty much a United States thing. That's an eating disorder. I think we talked about that in the motivation chapter. So bulimia was people that go on this continual idea of binging and overeating, and then purging by a lot of vomiting or exercise or X-lax or something like that, to get rid of all of the extra calories. Whereas, say, for example, in Malaysia, they have a disorder called running amok. And seemingly normal person that didn't, all of a sudden they just go on a violent rampage, okay? And when the person then recovers and comes back to themselves, they are not in any way, shape, or form blamed for the behaviors that they exhibited while running amok, because they were under the influence of this disorder. Another one that I want to mention here is hikikomori, which is very, very fascinating idea. Hikikomori is it started in Japan, but it's spreading across Asia now. Korea's got it pretty heavy too. And it's basically adolescents. And they just quit. They just sort of give up on life and they just stop doing stuff. Okay, this is this tells you the cultural basis. I mean, listen to this. At the age of 14, Kaisuke appeared to be a normally healthy teenage Japanese boy. Then one day he went into the family kitchen, closed the door behind him, and did something rather unusual. He refused to leave. Okay, this is a culture thing, because I can guarantee you, my kid goes in there and refuses to leave, I will kick his ass. All right? You can't refuse to leave my kitchen. All right? It's my kitchen. It ain't your kitchen. Get out of my kitchen. Okay? So clearly this is culture bound, because that's a Japanese context. A parent would allow this to happen. I could not even imagine letting this happen. Okay? 3 years later, he had still not left the kitchen, nor during that time had he allowed anyone else in. Oh my God, these words are just... All right, every time my daughter tells me that this is my room, and I'm like, yeah, no, you pay the mortgage? No, it's my room. I allow you to use that room, okay? His mother left meals for him at the door 3 times a day, and he made use of the toilet that was adjacent to the kitchen. The kitchen was filled with garbage because he didn't take any out. At first, the family cooked on a makeshift stove and ordered a lot of takeout, but when they figured out the kid wasn't going to leave, they built another kitchen. Wow, okay? So, apparently in Japan, these are not all that uncommon. My understanding is in a Japanese classroom, they have approximately 50 students per classroom, and on average, it is 1 student in each class is in this situation, okay? Now, to me, when I read this, I personally, I'm sorry, my Western bias tells me this is not a mental disorder. This is a lazy-ass kid. Because the majority of the boys that do this, then obsess on video games 24 hours a day. All right? And I'm like, that's... And in fact, they sometimes refer to these boys as children of the night. Because what happens is they don't stay inside all the time. They go out at 2 in the morning, and what happens apparently is if you want to find where these boys are, all you got to go to is 7-Eleven at 2 a.m. and there they are. All right? And I'm like, so the parents are giving the kid money to go out and buy that shit? I don't know. That's a Japanese thing. Well, when I was teaching in China, I decided to kind of explore this a little bit. So this hikikomori, though it started in Japan, has spread, as I said, across Asia. And so in China, there's some words that they use, all right? I can't pronounce them, but they literally would translate as something like homeboy or homegirl. Or you could be super homeboy or something like that, okay? In Taiwan, they just say otaku, all right? Which means video game child. Okay, so you get the idea here. Okay, they are NEET, no education, employment, or training, and so part of it is, yeah, I mean, kids are giving up. All right, because I can tell you, my nephew's in Korea. I mean, they both got their bachelor's degree. They can't get launched. They can't become adults. They're 31, 32 years old. They can't get out of their parents' apartment. There is no opportunity for these boys. And I feel bad for my nephew. I really do. So he gets a bachelor's degree, and then he gets a master's degree in North Korean political studies. And what's he going to do with it? He works in his mother's driving school. Yep, nothing there. Okay? So there's just no options, okay? Slightly different, nerd, hikikomori, bookworm. So this idea is very well recognized and understood across Asia, okay? But again, I have a hard time with it because I can't comprehend this in America because that's called enabling. There's a word for this, enabling. Mom leaves him food. Parents allow him to stay in kitchen. It's like, no, are you hungry, son? I have a solution. Get your ass out of the kitchen and find something to eat. I mean, that's how I manage it. Okay, so it's really interesting. Or how about this? Frigophobia. It's largely in China, And it's this belief that people, how do I put it? Number one, in China, one time ever I found an ice cube. Okay, I could not find ice in China. It does not exist. Okay, they are so deathly afraid that even on a hot day you're supposed to drink hot beverages. I don't comprehend this. Okay, but it's this extreme fear of being cold. In fact, one time, this was hilarious. Okay, I was in China and I was out with a couple of buddies there, and we were eating and drinking, and yeah, it was a good day. And all of a sudden there was this downpour. Oh shit. We run back to the hotel, and I'm on the way, and I'm a little bit, enjoying the day. And there was literally the street vendors in China at the end of the day, they just dump their old produce onto the road. They just dump it. And then every morning at 4 a.m., the streets are cleaned again, right? But now all of a sudden that means every night there's rotten fruit and shit on the ground. Can you imagine? It's downpouring, you're a little inebriated, you're running in the dark rain, and you step on rotten fruit. Guess what happens? Man, I thought I busted up my knee. I thought for sure it was swollen, and I don't know what to do. I gotta ice my knee, right? I can't do it. So I'm like, I called up my colleague, at that particular summer I was there with Dr. Zhang from religion, right? I'm like, oh, Willie, you gotta help me. What am I going to do? You speak Chinese. You can help. They got to have ice in this hotel somewhere, right? And finally, she couldn't find any ice either. So she goes to the shop in the hotel, the gift shop or whatever you're going to call it. And she goes down there and she goes inside of her freezer and she scrapes the snow out of the inside of the freezer and she fills a bag for me. Thank God I didn't break my knee, okay? But I swear, I tell you, I had to go to a Chinese hospital. Oh my God. One thing I can tell you with socialized medicine, it was like $10 for x-rays and medicines, everything, $10 total. Yeah. With no insurance, yeah, $10, here you go. I'm a foreigner, I'm not even, $10, all right, there you go. Yeah. So this frigophobia though, it's not just in China, in my experience, it's a lot more. So like as a side effect of this frigophobia, which can turn into a disorder in this way, but it's just, it arises from a cultural belief about cold is bad for you. And this actually was a pretty big deal when my wife was pregnant with our first baby. Okay? We were living in New York, and we were living in a basement. Somebody's basement, and they kind of cut it off, and you live in an apartment down there. And my wife was about 3 months pregnant, and the owner comes to us and says, "You're going to have to leave." Why? Well, your wife is pregnant. Okay. Well, and she's Asian, and she's pregnant. What the hell? She's Asian? I'm thinking lawsuit here, right? Well, he goes like this. Look, I'm on a fixed income. I know what happens with Asian mothers. When a baby is born, they have to heat up the house. They have to zoom. You have to turn the temperature up to 85, okay? And he was 100% right, by the way, okay? And he said, I cannot afford it. This is New York. I'm on a fixed income. You crank my heat up to 85. I am broke. I can't do it. And so, wow. He was right, by the way, yeah. With the babies, swear to God, a baby's born, you swaddle that sucker up. This is a burrito baby. Baby's just sweating. So you know what the answer is? Put another layer on. It all comes from a belief here.
Here's what I found.
Really? She's clever. All right. Can be treated with a balanced turnip juice mixed with ginger juice and honey. Ooh. I don't know. Okay. And there's a lot of different disorders out there. Coro, rootwork. There's so many. Okay. Oh, each culture has their own. All right. At one point in history, when it came to mental disorders, there was basically two categories: crazy and not crazy. Okay? And that's pretty much what it was. Either you are or you are not. But somebody, it was Emil Kraepelin. Emil Kraepelin went out and said, you know, when somebody does in fact have a mental disorder, it's not like their symptoms are random. The symptoms that people have tend to cluster together. If a person says, I just feel depressed, then they tend to also report difficulty sleeping, and they tend to also report their appetite changing. Okay? So he noticed that these symptoms had some commonalities to them. Okay? And so based on this kind of work, now what's going to happen is mental disorders will be defined based on a unique set of symptoms. Okay? So it's the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, okay, is this book which allows for, well, how do I put it? Emil Kraepelin. The DSM, the problem is it's very few people fit one category or another. They don't cleanly fit. Like here, we call this comorbidity. So you take people with obsessive compulsive disorder, you take people with depression, and there's huge overlap between the two. Okay? So it's like maybe this has a separate existence from this, but yet there's so much overlap and commonality in them that though I can dig this idea that we are going to classify and diagnose individuals. Individuals are unique when it comes to the expression of a mental disorder. Though two different people that are both experiencing clinical depression, there will be some similarities in the way they manifest that depression. There will be a lot of uniqueness as well. And so I'm not a big fan of using the DSM, though it is the go-to. There is no question about the DSM, okay? The DSM is somewhat evil. That if a patient, if a person is to seek any kind of mental health treatment, and now the person providing the mental health treatment would like to get reimbursed from the insurance company for that visit. The person providing the mental health treatment must put a DSM label on a person to submit to the insurance company. Okay? Even if the person that is providing the mental health treatment doesn't really feel all that comfortable with the label. If you don't put a label on, you don't get paid. Okay? And so the insurance industry is forcing the mental health professionals to say things they might not want to say. The problem also is that the self-fulfilling prophecy. Y'all heard of the self-fulfilling prophecy. And so once a label has been placed, people start to come to expect certain behaviors out of you. Oh, you have been labeled with this disorder, therefore this is a way you'll behave. And I will start to treat you differently. And as a result of treating you differently, you will respond differently. And in many cases, what was nothing but a couple of words on paper becomes a reality. Okay? So it's got its uses. I'm going to tell you that it's not completely useless, because it goes like this. Let's say, for example, I look at a patient and say, they are exhibiting these symptoms. These symptoms are similar to patients in the past that have been diagnosed with depression. Okay? Therefore, I believe this person is a member of this larger group. Now, I have this patient, and I would like to figure out what is going to happen with this patient. Okay? What treatments will work for this patient? So I go back to that original group and say, what worked for them? What happened with them? Whatever happened to this other larger group of depressed patients is most likely what's going to happen or work with this patient here. You get the idea that we need to, in order to, in fact, there's a word diagnose, and that means to give a label, right? But prognose, that is to understand how this is going to work moving forward. So we give them a diagnostic label which then helps us to predict what's going to happen moving into the future. Okay, the prognosis. Okay? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Well, the DSM, when it, diagnosis is just part of the story. And again, when used in clinical settings. Though the diagnostic label is the thing that gets the biggest attention, right? That's the front page news. But the fact is, if somebody is diagnosed with schizophrenia and they're in poor physical health, then clearly the prognosis is far worse. If somebody has schizophrenia and they have no social support, then clearly prognosis is worse. If they have no income, the prognosis, okay, so there's a lot of things. Diagnosis is just part of a larger package. It's just the part that gets talked about the most, okay? So, the DSM breaks down mental disorders into some larger categories. And we're going to talk about some of these, but disorders usually diagnosed in infancy, childhood, or adolescence. This would be mental retardation, but autism, for example. And what's crazy, okay, like, see, again, kind of my problem with the DSM, right up here. About, wow, now it's old news, but about 15 years ago, it feels like yesterday, at Virginia Tech University, there was a student that went on a rampage. Anybody remember that one? It was bad. And it was very, very clear, just in the little tiny bit that we saw this kid, that he was autistic, extremely autistic. There was no question about it, okay? But what happened was he was an immigrant. He immigrated with his family when he was 10 years old from Korea, okay? He was a Korean immigrant. And what happened was that in Korea, they don't use the word autism. It's not a word that really shows up. I mean, they like to deny it, to be honest with you. And so he comes to America, and clearly he's got some problems, okay? But now, based on the DSM, this boy who's now 10 years old, clearly autistic, there is no question about it, cannot be diagnosed as autistic because the definition is must be diagnosed before age 8. If it does not diagnose before age 8, it does not exist. And this boy would never receive that label and therefore never receive any assistance or help with his disorder, okay? Just because if it's not diagnosed before age 8, then it does not count. And it's like, yeah, but he wasn't in America before age 8, and therefore he never got the label. Too bad. It just is, okay? So, delirium, dementia, amnesia, cognitive disorders, okay? Mental disorders due to a general medical condition, very similar. A lot of people, like say for example, age dementia syndrome. So people that have age, one of the long-term symptomology can be real loss of memory problems, real cognitive dysfunctions. Substance-related disorders, schizophrenia. We're going to spend a good bit of time talking about schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. We're going to definitely talk about mood disorders. That would be more depression and things of this nature. Anxiety, we're going to talk a lot about anxiety disorders. Somatoform disorders are a little bit, we won't necessarily talk so much about, but there's some very odd somatoform disorders. Somatoform disorders are like, the most extreme one is some people that believe that their leg doesn't belong to them. They're like, you know, I'm dragging along this dead log all day long. It's not mine. It feels like a foreign invader, all right? I can't sleep, I can't think, I can't do anything. It's not mine. I don't own this thing. And in an extreme case, they literally get their own leg cut off, and they feel that was the effective treatment because it just wasn't there. So it's like, okay, all right, we got some silly, all right. I don't want to say crazy because I'm not that kind of guy, okay? All right, factitious disorders. these are fake, basically fake. But I'm going to come up with some of that later. Dissociative, I'll also spend some time on. Gender and gender identity disorders. Yeah, this is this is one right here that I don't know what the current status of this is. I'd be actually curious, because I guarantee you this table is at least 10 years old. And I'd be curious what given the state of the modern environment, what has changed there. I don't know. Eating disorders, and that'd be like the anorexia and the bulimia stuff. Sleep disorders, all right. Impulse control disorders, and so that would be gambling, stealing, setting fires, things of this nature. Adjustment disorders, I don't remember that one. No. Personality, we'll definitely talk some personality disorders. Or how about that? Not otherwise specified. In other words, you're just crazy, right? I don't really know what to say about you. Just a bucket load of crazy. Okay. So there have been a lot of critiques of the DSM because, like I said, I mean, every single symptom of every single disorder, you have them. You do. You have them. It's just what degree do you have? Okay. So it's not. Yeah. All right. Whatever. The border between normal and having it's like we're gonna see some of these, but it was like in order to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, you must have 5 or more of these symptoms. Okay, and so if you have 5 or more, your insurance pays for your treatment. If you have 4, you're out of luck because you didn't get the label, insurance don't kick in. Chances are 5 is worse than 4, but why is 5 the magic number? Okay, what is it that makes 5 a magic number and 4 not? Okay, value judgments. Oh yeah, there's definitely value judgments because it's like it's impossible not to impose your cultural beliefs on people. We're gonna spend more time on this one when we talk therapy at the last chapter. That it's impossible for a therapist, and I mean we already talked about this when we talked about Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And remember, at the top was a self-actualized person, and he implied a self-actualized person is healthy and strong, and he literally described himself. All right, remember that he described a successful white male. It was like, all right, there's your answer. I gotcha. Okay. And then again, here's just a version of the self-fulfilling prophecy idea. Okay. So here we find prior year prevalence of disorders. Okay. So what we find is in the United States, we've got a peak here, and going down. This is 2004. Now, what I gotta point out is number one, this is reporting. This is reporting of. Okay. But I am suspecting that if I got a version of this from 2021, these numbers would be up to the ceiling, okay? And part of it is COVID, but this may be unpopular, but I'm telling you. In the past, there has been a lot of shame associated with mental disorders, right? And we're going to talk about that. We've moved past the shame in a lot of ways to acceptance of mental disorders, okay? And I'm happy. I'm thrilled that we went from shame to acceptance. But I'm afraid that social media has done some nasty shit and has moved it from shame to acceptance to glorified, okay? That people are almost updating their social media posts with, if you don't have this disorder, then you're not cool or something. It's just, I'm cool with the shift from shame to acceptance. That is awesome. But acceptance to pride, I am not happy with that at all. I guess when I talk to some of the people in the younger generation, I do recognize that there's a wide degree of what normal looks like. Okay? Sometimes normal's here, sometimes normal's here. Okay? it's a broad range. Sure, you fall over here, but so do a lot of other people, okay? And again, it's like symptomology. I mean, of course I feel depressed sometimes, okay? I mean, everybody does, you know? So I'm sure it's an unpopular opinion, but I've seen the needle shift from shame to acceptance to, I don't want to say glorify, but it's in that ballpark. It's just my opinion. I don't know. Get me in trouble. So, turns out that there are clearly different people. Number one, poverty. People in poverty are much more likely to suffer from mental disorders. However, in a very strange situation, the immigrant paradox, poor immigrants that move to America actually have fewer mental disorders and better outcomes, all right? And it's really got to do with the social support that immigrant communities tend to have, okay? We find most mental disorders manifest themselves by early adulthood, all right? So throughout adolescence, what am I trying to say? Obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar, alcohol around 20, okay? Phobias can be earlier, antisocial can be way earlier. Major depression can be one that might strike later. But somewhere around this age is where a lot of they would start to manifest themselves. All right, this is good. All right, so I want to talk here about perspectives, or the way we think about mental disorders. And so from a Western perspective, okay, it's very clear that in the historical past, mental disorders were viewed in many ways as something of the nature of demon possession, okay? That if somebody, say for example, is experiencing hallucinations, the reason they're experiencing hallucinations is they're infected with a demon. There's a demon in their body, okay? And if this is the way you think, if your thought process is a mental disorder is the result of demon possession, and there's somebody over there, and that dude has got some mental disorder, and you're like, there must be something wrong with him, because I ain't got no demon in me, okay? So clearly this guy sinned, or this guy committed some kind of a problem. Somehow this guy allowed a demon into his body. So you can see from this supernatural perspective where shame would come from, right? It's pretty clear where shame is coming from, especially if you live in like a collectivistic culture, right, where your identities are intertwined. And so if one member of the family exhibits mental disorders, it's not just a reflection on this person, it's a reflection on the family, okay? Well, at some point in the 1780s, I think it was, 1790s, Philippe Pinel went to the, well, number one, he found that the hospital for people with mental disorders was the same as the prison for criminals. Oh, okay, that's a bit of a problem. And so somebody with a mental disorder was essentially brought in and chained up and pretty much just housed just like a prisoner would be housed. And I mean, Philippe Pinel comes in and goes, this person has not committed a crime, all right? This person is not, and before Philippe Pinel came in, there was basically zero chance. If you went into the mental hospital, you were not coming out, all right? It was not intended to make you better. It was intended to remove you from society, okay? To make your family's life easier, right? And so Philippe Pinel walks in and he goes, okay, part of the problem here is you're not treating them like human beings, all right? Yeah, they've got these problems going on, but they're still humans. Why don't you just treat them like, he said, take those chains off of them. And everyone said, Philippe, no, you're going to, he says, no, I mean, take off their chains, you know, take them outside, just treat them with respect, right? Just treat them like human beings. And lo and behold, just like that, people started to get better, okay? And so Philippe Pinel's kind of shifted a little bit of the thinking from more a supernatural to more of a psychological, because Philippe Pinel says, you know, the reason that these people are here, he started to notice, look, it's almost always poor people that are in here. It's not the rich people. what's going on here? I mean, it's that stress from being poor. It's the stress from living in this environment, okay? And so he really put this idea that mental disorders are the result of problems in our society, okay? So it was a big movement. And after Philippe Pinel, there was some notable people, like in America, Dorothea Dix was the big person that made the same basic shift in the United States. In England, it was Benjamin Rush. So it was a big movement, okay? Well, at some point in the mid part of the 20th century, a third views came about, and people were studying syphilis, all right? Syphilis is a venereal disease. You get it from you know what, right? You get it from doing the naughty. And what happens is syphilis, if left untreated, after a couple of years, the syphilis virus then migrates up to your brain and burrows into your brain, and then all of a sudden you start to get real psychotic and lots of symptoms come out, okay? And so the idea was a clearly medical problem, the syphilis virus, becomes a mental disorder. Oh, wait a minute, okay? And so all of a sudden there's this kind of a medical belief here. These disorders are an illness that, you know, in the same kind of a way, if you have a broken arm and you get the proper treatment, you should expect that your arm should heal. If you have a mental disorder and you get the proper treatment, we should expect it to heal. And at the same time, when we get to this far extreme end here, I mean, do you have shame if you have a broken arm? Is there any shame? No. So why should there be shame with a mental disorder? It's just a thing that is needing to be fixed. That's it, okay? No shame. So on the far extreme, you've got shame, and at the far other extreme, you get absolutely no shame. It's just, it is. It is what it is. You broke your arm. Okay, no problem. It is. Okay? And so we find that the medical model actually is pretty important, but we find that it becomes a problem as well, because you find that certain psychiatrists in particular that subscribe very heavily to this medical model. And so if a patient is coming in with some medical problems, what should you do? Throw some drugs at it, all right? Don't talk about where the problem comes from. Don't talk about effective coping strategies. Just whip some drugs on top of it, all right? Just make it happen, okay? So it's good in the sense that, you know, it removes shame. It's good because it recognizes that, you know, you might need help that's beyond your ability, okay? But it does also sometimes ignore the role that you can play in your own treatment, right? The role you can play in making things better, right? So the medical model, blah, blah, blah. Now, we often have this complicated view now. So we hopefully have moved past this supernatural approach. I mean, we as a society, we're sophisticated. We don't have this view anymore, do we? Maybe that's what we say. And the fact that though we have gotten way better than America, there is still some stigma and shame associated with mental disorders. As a society, it still is there. So we must still have at least some of this kind of thinking going on, okay? That you are somehow weak, and that's why you are in this situation, okay? So it feels to me that if you look at how much stigma and shame a particular culture has with mental disorders, will tell you how much they fall back on these types of explanations. So the biological, psychological, socio-cultural is a better attempt to understand disorders as a combination of all of these. Okay, so we got this idea here, the diathesis stress model. Okay, and again, it really comes out of this notion. The diathesis stress model, it goes like this. It says all human beings are born with a potential for every mental disorder. It's a genetically based thing, okay? Some people are born with a higher potential, some with a lower potential. Now we take you and we expose you to a world. So the diathesis is making reference to some kind of a genetically based vulnerability or potential, okay? Stress is a lot of things, but stress is the environment around you. And so what can happen is, if you are born with a relatively low potential and you have a stressful world, you'll just manage just fine. But if you're maybe born with a higher potential and some stress hits you, and you might manifest these mental disorders, okay? So you could live your entire life with the potential that never manifests itself because you didn't, either it was low enough or your stress level was not there. I had one student, one person I interacted with that had this. This was perfect representation of it. And I know I keep talking Korean because that's what I know is Korean. Okay, and so there was this, when I was living up in Missouri, there was this boy. He was the pastor's son. All right, the pastor. So in a Korean community, there are high expectations on the pastor's son. The pastor's son is in the spotlight, okay? And he was a straight A student. Not just straight A, he was going to the magnet school in the city, right? So that it drew from all the other high schools to the, and he was valedictorian of the magnet school, all right? Holy shit, I mean, this kid's got it going on. And he had already gotten a full scholarship to the University of Missouri up at Kansas City, UMKC, all the way through undergraduate and dental school. Totally paid. Room, board, housing, tuition, everything up to a dental degree, okay? He was writing his National Merit Honor application, right, to get the final expenses he would need, you know, for books and residual expenses. And he writes this application, and he gives it to his dad. Here, Dad, check this out. You know, what are you thinking? And his dad's jaw just, what the hell is this? Okay? And it was a page of gibberish. I mean, you could read a sentence and it sort of made sense, and then all of a sudden the next one would be just like a completely different topic, and it jumped all over the board. It was like, what the happened? Okay? And so this kid, right, for some reason he asked me to go to help him, right? He asks me. And now, as I'm going through his stuff, I figured out what his stress was. I figured it out. I mean, here's the deal. You're the pastor's son. You have to be number one. You have to be first place. You know, he's got this potential stress because he's living in a tight-knit, interdependent community, and now he's going to be moving, you know, 5 hours away, right? So he's got this loss of family support coming at him. Well, what I found was the thing that triggered him was he was a nice boy, but he was not a handsome boy. He was definitely not a handsome boy. And he asked the girl out. This was his first time that he tried this. And she not only said no, but she said, hell no, are you kidding me? That kind of a response, okay? And it was this, not just rejection, but wow rejection, that seemed to be the trigger that set him off, okay? I mean, he was already, his stress level was already amazing. It had to have been. I mean, the pressure on this kid. I mean, he's not just a pastor's son, the pastor's first son, right? So that even adds to the pile. And this snap, and it was actually quite a scary experience. So he asked for me to come, and they had him at the, we went to his house, and then it became very, very clear that this is not something we could deal with in his home, that this was a major, major, major problem. We took him into the emergency room, and at the hospital, we were trying to get him admitted into the psychiatric ward. And when we walked in the door, I mean, he had said, yeah, I mean, I recognize things are, you know, but he was jumping all over, all kinds of shit. problem was that he had turned 18 about 2 days before this. That is a major, once a kid turns 18, the whole game changes, okay? And so all of a sudden, we're at this room, and when we walked in, he had said, yeah, sure, yeah. But it takes like 4 hours to open up a space up in the psychiatric ward. And so we're there in the emergency room for about 4 hours waiting for things to happen. And in this 4 hours, he just sort of devolved. He just sort of, right down. And when they finally brought the paperwork in, only that kid can sign that paper. If his parents were to sign that paper to put him in, that would be called an involuntary commitment, and that goes on your legal record, okay? That stays with you forever. If you sign yourself in, that's your own business, that's private, okay? So he has to sign that paper. They put a pen in his hand and it just falls, finally they put it in his hand, they kind of hold his hand, they go, and they shake his hand around, like, you signed it, you're in. Now, I was there, and I can guarantee you it was the right thing to do. In this situation, it was the best thing for his future, okay? But what happens is that I can see that being used pretty poorly in different situations. Abused. Well, he got better with medicine. He got better. Had some issues. So he finishes up summer, and he goes off to UMKC. Within 2 weeks, the school calls the parents. You gotta come pick up your kid. We can't, we just are not able to do this. This is not something we're able to do. And he tried about 3 different times to go back up to UMKC and get his, in the end he could not. He just could not manage his medications. He could not manage his situations. Being away from home, I'm sure, was an incredible stressor for him. So in the end, he ended up transferring to a university, well, in fact, the university I was teaching at, the Missouri State. So he ended up coming back to Missouri State University for his degree, and things got much better for him. So I'm happy, but it really derailed this kid, man. But it was the amazing representation of the diocese's stress, that there was stressors in his life that were just more, that just took his genetically based vulnerability, and pow, there it came. Okay? Just like that. So it was an interesting experience, that's for sure. Okay, cool. La la la, la 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 la. Yeah. Okay. Insanity and responsibility. And this is another one that the medical model sometimes gets a problem with. I'll just go like this. So, in 1843, there was a guy that thought that the Prime Minister of England was the devil. So he attempted to assassinate the Prime Minister of England. And when they brought the guy on trial, it became very obvious that he did not know what the hell was going on. Okay? And so there was this general idea that you cannot convict somebody of a crime if at the moment the crime was committed, they did not understand that either was a crime or did not understand potential consequences of that act. Okay? And that is the basic logic. So somebody that is guilty of a crime but is mentally ill can be sent to a hospital rather than prison. However, 16% of inmates have severe mental disorders. Okay? And this is actually pretty powerful question. In one case here in Texas, I don't know, about 20 years ago, there was this guy, Larry Robeson. He was schizophrenic, he had schizophrenia, and it was a case where, as we're going to describe later, he lost any social support he had. Schizophrenia tends to drive apart social relationships. It does, and we'll talk about it. And so Larry Robeson was homeless. And what would happen is that he would get put into the mental hospital, and then they would put him on medications, and then he'd be all better again, and then they'd let him go. But Larry he lacked the basic skills to function in life. Larry doesn't know how to balance a checkbook. Larry doesn't know how to turn on electricity. How does he know that stuff, okay? And so then pretty much inevitably, Larry would then drop again. it was just a repeated pattern. He was homeless, and he was like sleeping on doorsteps and shitting on the front steps of the shops, and the shopkeepers are like, you gotta pick up Larry, okay? This can't happen anymore. He's in, he's out, he's in, he's out, and then all of a sudden the insurance company goes, that's it. He's used up his lifetime coverage for mental disorders. There is no more money, period. Larry has $0 left, okay? So now he's totally on his own with no help of any treatment, okay? And he kills a girl that's about 10 years old. 5 people, okay. And he's executed. So whose fault is it? 5 murders were committed. Whose fault is it? Somebody has to be blamed for this, guys.
The insurance company?
The insurance company, the corporate evil bastards.
Whoever let him be discharged.
Whoever lets him get discharged. I don't know. The person that lets him get discharged is being told by the one above them, who's told by the one above them, who's told by the one above them. I don't know. Maybe we as a society for allowing an insurance company to reject it. Maybe that's one thing that we as a society should have done a hell of a lot longer ago was Obamacare. But even under socialized medicine, there's still a distinctly different, here is your medical benefits, here is your mental health benefits. They clearly break the two apart, and mental health money runs out a whole lot faster if you need it, okay? It's limited to like 10 grand a year, 20 grand, I don't know what it is, different companies, different stuff. And if you got severe mental disorders and you go see a psychiatrist 10 times, that's it. There's your 10 grand. It's gone. All right? So, whose fault is it? Is it Larry's fault? I mean, he literally did the action. His family's fault? Should his family been the one taking care of him? I don't know. That's rough. All right? Is it society? Do we have an obligation as a society to take care of those of us that have the least ability to take care of themselves? I'm a damn liberal, so I say yes. Okay? I say yes. I'm a big fan of Obamacare. I really am. I think we should take that about 25 steps further than it is. I think it's shameful that we as a first world nation have health care as poor as it is, but even worse, mental health care in America is shameful. It is absolutely shameful what we allow. It's horrendous, okay? I mean, in other civilized, like I said, in China, I bust up my knee, it's $10. Let's be honest, that's probably about what it actually cost, okay? That's about what it actually cost to do everything they did, all right? Now, if I bust up my knee in America, you can expect about 25 grand, okay? $10, 25 grand. One is bankruptcy, one is not. All right. So, I think actually, you know what? That's such a beautiful place. Well, God, I don't want to start. Well, I do want to start that, but no, I'm going to not start it. I'm not going to start that, because if I start that, that's a whole other road. So, we had a good conversation here about what is a mental disorder as far as, and again, there's a lot of discrepancy, but I am very clear. I mean, evolution 101. If you cannot perform those behaviors to adapt to your environment, that is a problem, okay? The adaptation thing, okay? So we'll start to talk about more specific mental disorders on Tuesday, all right? All right, let me finish up my attendance. Come on.